You have just watched the sentencing for Michelle Troconis for her role in the murder of Jennifer Farber-Dulos, and as she was sentenced to 20 years in prison for 14 and a half of those 20 years. Our legal analyst, criminal defense attorney Walter Hussey, is here now. He's been joining me throughout this landmark trial, and he is here now with some perspective. You are not connected to this case. You've not represented Troconis, but as we were watching this come down, what is your take on the sentence that the judge just handed down?
Well, Kara, to be fair, I thought it was going to be a little more severe. So, as you could see, it was really well thought out. He gave it a lot of time. And the way he laid it out seems to make some sense. He's given her some credit for a life well led up to this point. No criminal activity, no convictions. But the severity of the crime called for a significant punishment. It could have been far worse. And I think the judge was more than fair.
So basically she was sentenced to 20 years. However, then he said she'll only serve 14 and a half in prison. Is that because of that life well led, according to him?
How it works, actually, she could have got up to 50 years.
Okay.
You know, in theory. So what this sentence actually means is, so it's 20 years in jail, suspended after the service of 14 and a half years, okay, and 5 years of probation. So when she gets out on probation, she'll have time over her head. In other words, if she were to violate her probation, there'd be 5.5 years hanging over her head.
Okay.
That's
so
how the sentence
she
works.
gets out at 14 and a half years, and if she violates any probation, she would have to go back to prison to serve the full 20.
Potentially.
Okay.
And I don't think she'll serve all the 14 and a half. She'll probably get some, you know, credit and good time. So it'll be less time than that. It won't be a full 14 and a half.
So let's just talk about, before we were going through this, we talked about it was very clear from Judge Randolph's comments when he talked about what the jury could infer, that Michelle Troconis knew about this murder, even helped cover it up, even planned. He made all these inferences that the reason she didn't ask where he was is because she knew exactly what Fotis was doing. So he was laying that out to say, I see that she did these things, or that's what the evidence has pointed to.
Yeah, he made it very clear. I think that's what he believed happened completely. I mean, he made it very, very clear. He went to the point to read it into evidence, exactly the points that kind of left no doubt in his mind. I think that was pretty much clear.
It was heartbreaking to listen to the Dulos children today give their impact statements. I know many people, but especially the kids, talking about how they don't have their mother anymore, how there's a hole that's never going to be filled. Her son talking about he didn't get a chance to say I love you. When you have the fact that 5 children are growing up without a mother, how does that play into the sentencing?
Well, I think it does. You know, in some regard, I think the judge probably had a game plan going into the sentence. As you could see, his remarks are pretty well written out, prepared. But I think he's going to allow for what he's going to hear from the children, and it's got to sway you. It really does. And by the way, I mean, let's face it, she was convicted of a really terrible crime. It's terrible what happened to the kids, and quite frankly, she needs to be punished for it, and she was.
So he also, we just heard, they asked for an appeal bond, and that was denied. He said you don't have a constitutional right, which means she will need to go directly to prison without the opportunity to have a bond while she appeals this.
That's correct.
And that's the end all, I guess, at the moment. You can request it again, but at the moment she needs to stay in prison while she's awaiting her appeal.
Yeah, as it stands right now, unless Attorney Schoenhorn can figure out a different way to approach it, but right now that's the way it stands.
You know, we also heard from Jennifer Dulos' mom, Gloria Farber-Dulos, and that was something that in her victim impact statement she talked about what a great woman Jennifer was, but also she had expressed in other reports that she wanted to make sure that she didn't just get to go out on an ankle bracelet while we wait for this appeal, that wouldn't really be enough. Is that, when a judge says no appeal, are the victim statements taken in to that consideration, or that's more just a legality?
It could be. I can't speak for the judge on this, but it may have entered his mind.
Okay. So if you're